Pink Floyd is one of those bands that even people who don't really like music have at least heard of, and when you look at their career, it's not hard to see why. They've sold over 250 million albums, making them one of the most successful groups of all time. We go all the way back to 1965, where we have the original lineup of Syd Barrett, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright. This original four was one of the UK's brightest psychedelic groups, and in 1967 we have the great David Gilmour join before Syd Barrett leaves due to drug and mental issues in 1968 to give us the core lineup most fans know and love of Gilmour, Waters, Wright, and Mason, who went on to produce some of the greatest records of their time. Wright left for a period in 79 while Waters officially left the group in 85, which shifted the leadership to David Gilmour. Their last tour ended in 1994. Later on, Gilmour and Mason decided to revisit old recordings of Wright, who unfortunately died of cancer in 2008, to release their final record, The Division Bell, in 2014. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 and the UK Music Hall of Fame in 2005. It is Pink Floyd, and today, my friends, we are going to be counting down their records from worst to best. They have released 15 studio albums in their storied career. Some don't get talked about as much as the most famous ones, of course, so I'm going to be looking forward to highlighting these. Before we get into the countdown, though, I appreciate y'all stopping by. I want to reiterate, this is just my opinion. All right, I know some people out there have been listening to their music for 40, 50 years. I became a fan. I've really dug into their music and enjoyed it. Was looking forward to making this video for y'all. So if you like it, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. That helps us out, and hit that big red subscribe button. We're going to be having more countdown discography rankings up on the channel here, along with our awesome album reviews, which I just want to plug as well. We have reviewed The Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall on the channel, which I will link down in the description below. But enough talk, let's get into the list. I ranked these predominantly on how good I thought the music was, first and foremost. Whenever there was a close race in there, I gave the nod to maybe just influence and legacy. But as I said, man, this is just my personal opinion. Don't take it as gospel, all right? But be sure to leave your comments for your top Pink Floyd records as well. Love to see your list and see everybody's opinion. So we're going to start this off with number 15. I think this is Pink Floyd's worst record. I know there's some more adventurous fans who have this, some even in their top 6 or 7 albums. We're going with Guma. Now, this is a double record, and honestly, the live portion of the album, the first disc, you got Astronomy Domine, Saucer Full of Secrets, which both lend well to a live recording. But then we get to that second side, which is just very experimental, and just it doesn't really play well with the replayability of the record. You had Wright, Waters, Gilmour, and Mason each getting their own experimental composition on that second disc. So much psychedelic noodling that goes nowhere. Mason had a song, The Grand Vizier's Garden Party, which was especially tedious. This one is only for the Pink Floyd completionists, in my opinion. I'm sure there's going to be some Guma lovers in the comments, man, and, you know, God bless you. We're going to go now to their last official release. It is The Endless River. This is made mostly of ambient and instrumental music. There's only one song on here that has lyrics, and as I mentioned in the intro, this was really a tribute to the great keyboardist of the group, Richard Wright, who, as I mentioned, passed away. Gilmour and Mason revisited some recordings that he did during the Division Bell era, kind of worked those into some of their new work that they were coming up with, and came out with this. Again, not a record that is bad per se, but is it one I would ever revisit again for any reason besides kind of doing this video? I don't think so. They obviously have much better instrumental work in their catalog that I would gravitate to, but for what it was, man, I think it was cool for the band to do this and remember Richard in this way. After that, we come up to the first soundtrack that's going to appear on this list, number 13, the soundtrack to the film More. Now, this one is heard a little bit by some themes that I think go well just with the movie in general and don't necessarily translate just to an album setting. This is in that early psychedelic period where you just have some wailing in here that doesn't really go much of anywhere. But I do have to highlight a couple tracks. You got the Nile song, which is probably Pink Floyd at their most heavy metal, and it still packs a punch to this day. One of, I think, the most underrated tunes in Floyd's catalog. And then you also have Green is the Color, which is also a beautiful tune. Still not enough to raise this up from the bottom of the pile here, but hey man, they got that soundtrack money in those early days. You gotta take it. Next up, we're to number 12, and we have The Final Cut. This is the record that came after The Wall, another Waters concept record. Here, it's more hit and miss, though, of course, than The Wall for me personally. Some of the tunes on here translate almost to Roger Waters just being the old man yelling at a cloud at points, but then that's kind of contrasted with some heartfelt tunes that really touch on his father who passed away in World War II and just dealing with that concept in there. Really, the concept of this could be boiled down to anti-war. Waters' delivery here is oftentimes a bit over the top, but still the title track is very powerful lyrically and still holds that special Pink Floyd atmosphere. You could tell though the magic was definitely running a little thin, as would be evidenced by Waters leaving the group just a couple years later. Now we're going to number 11 on my list, A Saucer Full of Secrets. Again, in that early psychedelic period for the group, a bit too much psychedelic wankery at points, especially that A side, but the B side is great, especially the title track with its 4 distinct instrumental sections, and the final track, Jug Band Blues, which is Sid's last Pink Floyd gasp. You know, Sid was only on the first 2 records, and really the Piper at the Gates of Dawn is his big driving creative force here, and I think it's interesting to note how that still set up the group though for a lot of their further records and the sound that they were going in. I think they would have never reached the heights if Barrett would have still been in the group, but still his foundation and story is one to be remembered, and without Sid, I'm doubtful Pink Floyd would have even gotten off the ground. So you gotta tip your cap to him and what he was doing in these early records here. It's a shame that his demons kind of got the best of him and the way his life turned out, but he definitely left a musical legacy behind to be proud of. And now we're going to number 10, A Momentary Lapse of Reason. This was recorded primarily on a houseboat and was the first Pink Floyd record without Waters. This outsold the Final Cut, which probably didn't bother Roger at all, I'm sure, knowing him, right? Here we have Gilmour's guitar, now that he's kind of the creative force of the group at the time, taking the lead here, and Gilmour's one of my favorite guitarists of all time, so that's probably why I like it a little more than the Final Cut. I know your mileage may vary on some of that. I know some people that really love the Final Cut. I'm more of a Gilmour guy. While lyrics might be a bit lacking, there are still great moments in the record that harken back to that instrumental glory years of the early to mid 70s. Track like On the Turning Away, Learning to Fly, and The Closer Sorrow are all good to great. It is a bit long at times, I will admit, and falls to that 80s production that maybe didn't age quite as well, but still a solid Gilmour effort, and that's going to lead us into my number 9 pick, The Division Bell, which I think is Gilmour's best effort as the solo kind of leader of Pink Floyd. It has that, of course, famous cover. It is their only record that was released in the 90s. It definitely had a more grand atmosphere to it that felt like it should in the group. A bit of cinematic feel at times, which I appreciated, and that A-side is especially a song with that Gilmour classic guitar playing in What Do You Want From Me and Marooned. Wright actually gets to take some co-vocals on Wearing the Inside Out, and the theme of communication, the Berlin Wall coming down, are themes in the record. Whereas A Momentary Lapse in Reason definitely felt like an hour. I think The Division Bell flies by and makes the best use of its time and is an enjoyable listen. And I really just enjoy the Gilmour leads on here and the way he was able to arrange and structure the group. Next up, we got number 8, Atom Heart Mother. The title track is an example of prog rock long song suites done right. And when those horns hit, woo! Y'all know how much I like the horns if you've been watching the channel. And this starts to really see in the progression of the group pushing more into those prog rock elements that they would become famous for. You know, Pink Floyd definitely, in my opinion, is the most famous prog rock group of all time. Waters comes in with the beautiful track If, and that's followed by the surprisingly accessible and fun Summer 68 by Right. You have Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast brings this down as an overly artsy number that should have never ended off this otherwise very strong record. So definitely check that out. And hey, anytime you get a cow on the cover, you probably are going to be coming up with some cool stuff, in my opinion. Now, we're going to go to number 7. Obscured by Clouds. This record, I think, is Floyd's most underrated album. You hardly ever hear people talking about it online or being brought up in critics' articles about the group, and I think that's a shame because this soundtrack definitely blows more out of the water their previous soundtrack, and it was released right before Dark Side of the Moon, which would of course propel them into superstardom, and you could kind of see some musical and lyrical themes that would be expounded upon on the Dark Side of the Moon. You also have Mudman in here, and the title track is definitely a bit futuristic and still sounds fresh to this day. And it has one of my 5 favorite Pink Floyd tunes, Childhood End, on here, which if you've never checked that one out and you're a Pink Floyd fan, I would definitely encourage you to do that. A bit of a precursor to Time, and probably up there with Gilmour's best lyrics he ever wrote. I just love the whole atmosphere of that track, man, and it is overall a very succinct and solid record from start to finish. Now, we're to number 6. We're going with Metal. And this is when the group is really starting to hit their stride in the early 70s. You have the A-side filled with amazing tracks like Gilmour's folky Fearless, and then the psychedelic folk tune A Pillow of Wind. But of course the highlight here is the track Echoes, which takes up the entire B-side, and those Saucer Full of Secrets and Atom Heart Mother were great in their own right. This, I think, is their best tune that's just incredibly long, save for one that we'll touch on in my number 1 spot. But just a fantastic album. Again, kind of a, when you look at that album cover, it again is very Floyd-esque, just a bit mysterious, and I think that fits the themes and lyrics of the record, as well as the sound there. They're really getting that down here, which would be expounded upon kind of in their core 4 of the mid-70s period. So definitely a fantastic record here. Now we're in the top 5, ladies and gentlemen, and for my number 5, we're going to go all the way back to their first record, Syd Barrett's biggest creative driving force in the group. We have The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I know some people aren't a huge fan of this. This is very psychedelic. I mean, just look at that album cover. But you have great songs like Bike, you have The Gnome, you have the Interstellar Overdrive, which still to this day is very wacky, very out there, very spacey with the panning from left to right. Definitely whenever you listen to that with headphones, you're almost brought forth into another dimension. I love Syd's talk as well on Lucifer Sam, talking about his cat. I mean, there's just a bunch of 60s psychedelic themes here that you would expect from a group like Pink Floyd, and if you've seen some of their early live performances, they definitely are able to kind of convey that out there otherworldliness, and I think The Piper at the Gates of Dawn is their best psychedelic work by far. And as I mentioned, kind of Saucer Full of Secrets was decent, more the soundtrack wasn't up to this. Of course, Guma, you already know my thoughts on that, but this right here, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, is their peak psychedelic work. For most bands, it would be their best record. So now we're to the top 4. My number 4 is going to be The Wall, one of the biggest selling records of all time. The double album Waters coming in with a concept record detailing Pink. And if you want a track-by-track review of that, we've done a long album review because there is a lot of tracks on this one, as y'all know. And again, that is linked down below where we expound on some of the cool tidbits and facts of this record. Waters details out this guy, Pink, who starts to build up a wall, breaking down that communication between himself and the outside world because he has been hurt by that outside world. It comes to a massive climax, and you have some of their most famous tunes on here. Of course, you have Comfortably Numb, which is a top 10 Pink Floyd song, as well as another Brick in the Wall Part 2. You also have Hey You, which is a crowd favorite, as well as Mother and The Thin Ice, which are a bit underrated, I think, on this record. Don't get talked about as much as some other tunes. Very, very solid concept record, even if it might be a bit pretentious at times. And it's not a record I revisit a ton, just because I think it's best taken in the front to back format due to the concept of it. But still, there's those singles you can pull out that hit even outside of the record. So Waters did very solid here, but I don't think it is even his best concept record. That's going to be number 3 album on this list, Animals. Only 5 tracks that are bookended by the short and sweet, beautiful acoustic Pigs on the Wing. Animals is a bit of a precursor to The Wall in the sense that Waters has much to say about Britain, Margaret Thatcher, capitalism, and social classes. Again, it might be a bit pretentious coming from a guy like Waters, who at this point was quite rich himself. And you see these interviews with Waters, and he definitely has that confidence about him, but hey, I still love the guy's music. And here you have, of course, Dogs detailing out the ruthless businessman who at the end of the day sees that, hey, it really is all an empty endeavor. You have Pigs, which is, again, fantastic. These songs are very long, but they all keep your attention, and that's something that Pink Floyd does better than a lot of the other, I think, prog rock groups that sometimes go 12, 15 minutes, and at the 8-minute mark, you're looking at your watch wondering when they're going to wrap it up. Pink Floyd has some of those, of course, but more times than not, they're really long tunes. Keep me interested, especially when they go around a theme and a concept that keeps you engaged from the start to the end of the record. A fantastic concept record. Probably my favorite album cover of theirs, just about as well, besides maybe Wish You Were Here. I just think it's a very striking image. And now we are to number 2, an album that needs no introduction. One of the best-selling albums of all time. Pink Floyd's most famous work by far. You have The Dark Side of the Moon. Has sold almost 50 million copies, has spent nearly 1,000 weeks on the charts since its release. I mean, what more needs to be said about that? We actually have a podcast where we went very in-depth to this, along with our review that, again, is linked down below. You have Pink Floyd here touching on a bunch of timeless topics, which is a reason I think this record's still going to be played 100 years from now. People are still going to be coming back to this and venturing out into their musical landscape. You have details on war, money, death, and all of this comes together in a front-to-back record that just flows so seamlessly. Those transitions that Pink Floyd is so famous for are definitely a highlight on this album. Of course, you have the fantastic track Money, the very thought-provoking song Time, which is what maybe my favorite Pink Floyd song, or it's right up there, probably in the top 5. You have The Great Gig in the Sky with Claire Torrey's just killer vocals. And then you have Us and Them, which details the pointlessness of war at many times. And you have great instrumentals in there with Any Color You Like. I mean, this record has something for everybody. I think the production on here was just out of this world, especially for its time. It holds up to this day in 2020, man. And it is, I think it deserves its legendary status. And I know for many it would be number 1, but for my number 1, I gotta go with a record that is one of those few records I would call perfect from start to finish. We have Wish You Were Here. What can be said about this record, man, without being overblown with hyperbole? But this 5 songs, I think it has one of the greatest songs of all time in the title track. And it has also, in my opinion, the best prog rock song ever in Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Have a Cigar with Roy Harper on vocals is fantastic, as is Welcome to the Machine. That caps off our 5-track masterpiece that sees Pink Floyd put together the best parts of the group. You got the contemplative lyrics, musical atmospheres that hit you in the gut, and instrumentations that is top of its class. Seamless transitions and heady concepts are an added cherry on top of this spectacular record. One of the greatest albums of all time of any genre, any era, and again, it even has a legendary album cover, as Pink Floyd so often did. I just think that this album sucks you in from that first note with Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and having that Syd Barrett theme that appears, the little guitar riff in there, and then it ends the record as well. Again, cool bookends, and you have Wish You Were Here, which I think is a lot of people, even if they don't like Pink Floyd, I found it impossible really to have somebody not like that tune. One of their most enduring and famous tracks, and one of, as I mentioned, the greatest records of all time. That's why it's in my number 1 spot. Let me know, y'all, down below what your rankings would be. Love to hear what the Pink Floyd fans have to say. This is a fun one to do, and they're going to be one of those groups that I think are going to live on long after we are gone, just because of their legendary status. Their 4-album run, starting with Dark Side of the Moon, going to Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall, stacks up, I think, against pretty much anybody's 4-album run of all time, just firing on all cylinders. And for 15 records, man, sure, there were a few clunkers in here, but that's a lot of music to produce, and to have most of it be at least solid to good is a testament. And then when you have so much of it to great, to extraordinary, to some of the best music ever recorded, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So that is the Pink Floyd rankings video, everybody. I'm glad you stopped by. I will be having more of these out, hopefully about 1 a month, and it'll be fun to just discuss and rank stuff. We all love to do it. We all love to get angry by it, but at the end of the day, it is a fun process. So thank you all for joining me, and until next time, happy listening, and I will see you.